So again, I'm Michael Novick. I'm leaving the board here at ICUJP, but I'm also the chair of the board at KPFK, the local station board, and a member of Anti-Racist Action, if not now, Jewish Voice of Peace, and work on changelinks. And we'll just go around through what I see on my screen and start with Tracy. Just let us know briefly.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy kato-kiryama. My pronouns are they and she. You could call me TKK as well. I'm with Nikkei Progressives and Vigilant Love. I'm a theater artist and I'm with the PULLproject Ensemble. And I'm also the co-founder and director of Tuesday Night Project. And we do a lot of programming in Little Tokyo in downtown Los Angeles.
Great,
It's really awesome to be here. Good morning. Karen?
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Hilfman. I'm excited to be here with new friends and old friends. I am involved with White People for Black Lives, the Fund for Reparations Now, and Jewish Voice for Peace.
Thanks. David Gardinier.
Hey everyone, my name is David Gardinier. I go by he, she, or they pronouns, and I'm a part of Aware LA and the Fund for Reparations Now.
Great, thank you. Stephen Fisk.
Good morning, everyone. I am Stephen Fisk. I am a musician, author, peacemaker a long time, and a member of the board of ICUJP, and glad to be here as always, and welcome to everyone.
Thanks. Alex Morales, welcome. You can unmute.
Greetings, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I am actively involved in the Agenda for Prophetic Faith, and that is also associated with Progressive Christians Uniting.
Thank you, and welcome. Steve Rohde, our chair.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Rohde, proud to be chair of this marvelous group. Very active with the Black Jewish Justice Alliance, Bend the Arc, a Jewish Partnership for Justice, the ACLU, and Death Penalty Focus. And I will ask everybody to mute when they are not speaking.
Thank you. Good reminder. Swantya?
I'm Swantya Wilms, and yeah, I found this group a few months ago and come as often as I can.
Phil Way.
Hi, good morning. I'm with the Orange Grove Friends Meeting in Pasadena and a member of the ICUJP board.
Ian, morning.
Hi, all. My name is Ian Schiffer. I use he, him pronouns. I work for NEFA, a spiritual community on the east side, and also am a member of Resource Generation and have been supporting with the Tongva Tahafa Land Conservancy. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Avita. Need to unmute?
Hi, I'm Vita Veach. Good morning. I'm a member of Culver Palms United Methodist Church and a member of the ICUJP board.
Thanks. Fernando, welcome. I hope you're feeling well, better.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fernando. I'm working on to unite the Black and Brown unity, as well as supporting many different organizations. Thank you.
And Carol Francis, maybe you can rename yourself too, if you have a chance. Or
oh,
maybe
okay, we'll do. Carol Francis, I am Likens. I'm a member of the board. I am also working with IFCO Pastors for Peace based in Harlem to acquaint people who live in medically underserved communities that they can get their free medical degree in Cuba.
Thank you. Jasmine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Peace Mom. I'm a member of Westchester Christian Science Church, a board member, ICUJP, and happy to be here. Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Hi. Rose.
Good morning. I'm Rose Liebowitz, member of St. Michael's and All Angels Episcopal Church, Studio City. involved with North Hollywood Homeless Alliance. Thank you.
Thanks. Anthony, I need to unmute.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Anthony Manousis. I'm on the board of ICUJP and also the Friends Committee on National Legislation and a member of Orange Grove Quaker Meeting. And I'm also co-founder of Making Housing and Community Happen, which is a housing justice nonprofit here in Pasadena. It's good to be here with you this morning.
Thank you, Anthony. Dave Clennon, our Zoom host today. And thank you, Dave. Need to unmute yourself again. There you
go. There we go. Dave Clennon, member of ICUJP, the ICUJP board, Jewish Voice for Peace, and dissident member of the Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA. Good morning. Oh, and my pronouns today are he, his, and him.
Thanks. Rick?
Hi, Rick Vinales, former board member of ICJP. Really good to see you all this morning.
Thank you. Dr. Ruby.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And first thing I want to do is thank Steve and thank Dave and thank Michael for starting this. And I am, I apologize for not being, this is the first year that I have not been at the federal building, but I was in prayer. I couldn't get on for Zoom, but believe me, I was there spiritually. So anyway, I am a part of 3 ministries. One is the United Church of Religious Science and CSL, and also Agape International Spiritual Center. I'm just sending love to everybody. I've worked with the police department and also with the sheriff's department regarding ministers. And I'm just here supporting the work, and I'm on the board of this loving work. And I pass.
Thank you. I think that's everybody that I see on so far. Some of the people might be joining us, and we'll, maybe they can introduce themselves later on. So our basic agenda, we do these introductions. We might have a brief announcement about ICUJP activities. I will let people know that after this meeting, we'll be staying on the line. Some of us, we have a series of working groups that at this point are working together on an event for January 23rd, which is a Sunday coming up, to try to build a faith-based network to end systemic racism. This is following up on some events we had last year. 2 of them with Dr. Melina Abdullah and DA George Gascon, and a third one where we began to work on the idea of building an ongoing network of people in faith-rooted organizations and communities that are committed to ending racism, trying to see if we can develop a critical mass and a base of people, in congregations, mosques, synagogues, churches, and other similar organizations that can really do impactful work around a whole range of issues of racism in the society. So that group will be, the working groups will meet after these meetings. I forget it's today, however, board meeting?
A board meeting.
Yeah, board meeting today. Okay, that's right. So I stand corrected, but the following week we will have our last one prior to the January 23rd. So people are welcome to come back for that on the 23rd and come back next Friday. We always say that if you come to a meeting of ICUJP, you become a member. And so you're all welcome to return any Friday you want. We continue to do these by Zoom, and I think we're going to be doing it by Zoom for a good while longer because of the pandemic. So we have usually a brief reflection, and this morning that's Stephen Fisk. So if you want to unmute Stephen and give us some words of uplift and wisdom, thank you.
Good, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. This will be a bit of some historic reflection, brief historic reflection. Beginning in the late 15th century with Christopher Columbus, the European colonial nations of Spain, England, France, the Dutch Republic, and Portugal sailed to the Western Hemisphere on missions of predatory conquest. Like lions, tigers, and wolves, who hunt by stalking, chasing, pouncing upon, dragging down with claw and fang, killing and devouring their prey. The conquest and ravishing of the prey of the new Americas fed the carnivorous appetite of the colonial conqueror. Christopher Columbus and others that followed may have been initially chasing after an ocean passage to the Far East, but what they found instead was a vast fertile wilderness of 2 continents, inhabited by native peoples who had been living off the land for 15,000 years. The colonialists pounced, killed, enslaved, removed, and ethnically cleansed the indigenous tribal cultures, seizing lands with the proprietary interest of exploiting and extracting resources to satisfy the hunger of the mother country for riches and empire. Using the horror of the Atlantic slave trade, plantation capitalism flourished in the 13 colonial states, especially in the South, establishing the dominance, exceptionalism, and patriarchal supremacy of the white race, and set in stone the archetype of the white landowner master in the American mindset of white supremacy. As the Revolutionary War was won and the Declaration of Independence, the Preamble, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution itself extolled the high ground of democratic ideals, the young nation was conflicted and ensnared in the crushing contradictions of colonialism, white supremacy, slavery, and slaughter. We remained ensnared when the crushing hypocrisy of the 3/5 compromise was written into the sacred text of the law of the land, basically depicting a Black man as 3/5 of a human. We remained ensnared with that constitutional law through the formative stages of the United States, through the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves of 1863, the nightmare of the bloody Civil War, and the failure of Reconstruction. We remained ensnared through the Black Codes, the Jim Crow laws, the Ku Klux Klan, lynchings, and various broken treaties and massacres of the Indian Wars, and the 1897 Supreme Court decision of Plessy versus Ferguson, which established the separate but equal doctrine, legalizing segregation and upholding the Jim Crow laws, which stood until the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954. We remained ensnared in the lynching, mob madness, invasions, killings, and destructions of Black neighborhoods and businesses, as happened in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898, Atlanta in 1906, and in the Black Wall Street Massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. In all 3 cases, white denial, revisionism, and the dismissing and burying of the horrible, truthful story took place. We remained ensnared through Emmett Till, the Montgomery bus boycott, the Rosa Parks Martin Luther King movement of nonviolence, and we remain ensnared today, unable, it seems, to free ourselves from the grip of white supremacy and its continuing hold on our national psyche, as seen in the shooting after shooting of Blacks by white officers, the mob madness of Charlottesville, the murder of George Floyd, and so many others, in front of witnesses in broad daylight, and the January 6th insurrection. Individually, we must ask ourselves, where is the predatory colonialist behavior in myself, acting out a takeover of my thoughts and actions? And how can I self-analyze, reflect, make amends, and make choices that allow myself the liberation from my own susceptibility to tyranny? Collectively, as the threat to democracy continues to divide our nation, the question is, will we remain ensnared in the predatory grip of white supremacy, systemic racism, hate, and bigotry, and succumb to the tyranny of authoritarian takeover, of voter suppression, and right-wing ultranationalist insurrection? Or can we come to accept and recognize the disease of social dysfunction we are afflicted with and engage in healing, public wokeness, and activism, such as the BLM marches in the street, which demonstrates true democracy in action, the call to protest and the call to civil rights and justice in the spirit of nonviolence and the purging out of the disease of white supremacy? I will end with a quote from Cardinal Sean Molloy, Archdiocese of Boston, at the interfaith service after the Boston Marathon bombing on April 18th, 2013. Quote, "The Jewish people speak of tikkun olam, repairing the world. God has entrusted us with precisely that task, to repair our broken world. We cannot do it as a collection of individuals. We can only do it together, as a community, as a family, with a renewed spirit of determination and solidarity, and with the firm conviction that love is stronger than death."
Thank you, Stephen, for that sweeping indictment and challenge to all of us. And maybe you could send that to the list. I think we'd probably like to post it.
Michael.
Yes.
Little correction here. Check my calendar, my satellite set calendar. Today's January 14th, the second Friday of the month.
That's right. So we do have your, is that correct?
No, you guys are not checking your emails. We have a board meeting at 9:35. The agenda notice went out to the entire board and there's been responses. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Okay.
Thank you, Carol Francis.
All right.
All right.
So that business aside, we will get to our main agenda item, which is the presentation this morning, and I'll introduce people briefly. I've known and worked with a number of them in different areas, White People for Black Lives, If Not Now, Aware LA, and very pleased that they are joining us today to speak about the issue of reparations and the transformative nature of that struggle. So I'll turn it over to them, Karen, David, Ian, and TKK, and let you introduce yourselves further and explain this morning's presentation. Thank you very much for being with us.
The
and
approach...
afterwards, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and we'll have a closing invocation. So we have well over an hour to hear you, and then we'll be able to discuss what you present with us. Thank you.
Great.
So, Karen,
go ahead,
Karen, I want to introduce you because as a participant and a moderator, often people in your position don't get introduced while you're introducing others. And I'm doing it because it's been an extraordinary pleasure to work with Karen at the Black Jewish Justice Alliance. You've heard about some of her biography in her brief introduction, as well as in the materials included in the announcement for today's program. But you always learn more about people in these contexts. And I want people to know that she retired from a human resource career at Jewish Family Services and has, by her own account, learned from younger generations about how the abolition movement, abolition of prisons and police, is more nuanced, grounded, and constructive approach to dismantling racialized capitalist and imperialist systems of oppression than was the revolutionary movement of the 1970s. I just personally also want to, I'm eager to meet David and Tracy, but I want to give a personal shout out to Ian, who I've met and been working with at NEFA, an extraordinary leader, and I'm so thrilled that he's on this panel. So I will turn it over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I also want to say thank you to Stephen Fisk for that amazing reflection, because it really puts us right in the center of what we're talking about. And we're thrilled to be here with you today to talk about reparations and land back from the point of view of us. We are movement allies. I want to say a little bit more about our panelists, who I'm just thrilled to be in their presence this morning. And Tracy Kato-Kiriyama is a multifaceted and multi-talented writer, performance artist, and organizer. She is an artivist. And she works with, as she said, Nikkei Progressives and Vigilant Love. Nikkei Progressives is a multi-generational community group that stands up for immigrant rights, Muslims, Little Tokyo, and Japanese American issues. Vigilant Love is a solidarity community against Islamophobia and violence. Schiffer is an organizer, a resource mobilizer, and a ritual leader. He's been part of resource generation for a long time, and works as a community weaver with NEFA, which has been mentioned here a couple of times. It's an open-hearted spiritual community, and in his role, he supports bridge building and multi-faith tikkun repair. And Ian also works in support of the Tongva Tarahat Bahavaha Conservancy. David Gardinier founded the Fund for Reparations Now in 2019, and he sees reparations as his highest calling. He's also active with Aware LA, the Alliance of White Anti-Racists Everywhere, and has a day job as an analyst and equity inclusion officer with the city of Santa Monica. And one last thing about me, I'm Hazel's grandma. So after we hear from Ian, Tracy, and David, we will open it up, as was said, to questions from all of you for a discussion. To center the conversation, I'd also like to share a short land and labor acknowledgement that we use at the Fund for Reparations Now at our meetings. And it goes like this. We are gathered here today on stolen land, benefiting from the wealth of a nation built with stolen labor. We assert our commitment to seeing these wrongs righted, this wealth redistributed, this culture shifted, and all beings thriving. Before Ta-Nehisi Coates published his groundbreaking article, The Case for Reparations, in 2014 in The Atlantic, reparations was hardly a topic of mainstream conversation. Since then, things have changed dramatically. More people of goodwill and conscience are recognizing that a lot of what they have, perhaps by becoming aware of previously unacknowledged life advantages, that a lot of what they have has been and still is systematically denied or limited for Black people. In addition to that, as more of America's true history is excavated, it's becoming clearer the extent to which business, financial institutions, political institutions, laws, federal and state governments, religious institutions, and higher academic institutions were shaped by slaveholder interests and built on the backs of enslaved human beings. It's undeniable this country owes a debt to African Americans for slavery and its legacies. Although different but similar as America's other original sin, America owes a debt to its indigenous peoples whose entire cultures were devastated and lands stolen as Europeans colonized the United States. We make our lives and homes today on this land because of that chilling and ghastly history. The story of reparations between the US government and Native Americans is long and complex and by no means satisfactory. In seeking repair, Native American leaders today are calling for a variety of remedies, including rematriation of the land or land back. So how can we align with these movements for repair, and how can we do it in the best way possible? So in order to do it well, it's important to understand what reparations are and what they are not. Let's see, one second. The United Nations definition is most complete and based in international law. So I want to share a summary version adapted by NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. So reparations is a process of repairing, healing, and restoring a people injured because of their group identity and in violation of their fundamental human rights. Groups that have been injured have the right to obtain from the government, corporations, institution, or families responsible for their injuries what it is that they need in order to repair and heal themselves. What they need in order to heal and repair themselves is important because it denotes that the specific forms of reparations must take be determined by the people who have been injured rather than by those responsible for the injury. There are 5 conditions that must be met for full reparations. And thank you for the screen share. The first is cessation of harm or injury and assurances and guarantees of non-repetition. The second is restitution and repatriation. Restitution means to reestablish the status quo that existed before the wrongful act was committed, and that harms traced to the wrongful acts are reversed, at least to the extent that they can be. Otherwise, restitution is completed through compensation. With compensation, the injuring state, institution, or individual is obligated to compensate for damage if the damage is not made good by restitution. Compensation is required for any financially accessible damage suffered to the extent appropriate and proportional to the gravity of the violation and circumstances. Satisfaction. This is part of reparations for damages such as emotional injury, mental suffering, and injury to reputation. Apologies fall under this category. Next slide, please. Rehabilitation, which includes legal, medical, psychological, and other care and services, is also part of reparations. So reparations is complex. It's not just donating money, it's not paying someone's bills, or just making an apology. Full repair requires acknowledging accountability, the cessation of harm, restitution, satisfaction, and systemic change. For examples of reparations at the nation state level, these are some of the most well-known. The German government has made reparations to Holocaust survivors. Austria also has paid reparations to Holocaust survivors. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommended reparations for survivors of the apartheid regime, but only a small fraction, hardly anything, was ever done in that regard. Canada in 2005 made reparations to Indigenous peoples forced to attend government and church-run schools, and in 2017 to Indigenous people forcibly taken from their homes and placed in foster care or adoption as children with non-Indigenous families. In 1988, as a result of immense grassroots pressure in the United States, Congress passed the Civil Liberties Act, providing reparations to Japanese Americans who were interned in camps during World War II, and to the Japanese American community in general. In 2015, Japan agreed to reparations in the form of elder care to Korean comfort women, and they also issued a renewed apology. In 2016, a UN panel concluded that the US owed reparations to African Americans for slavery and its legacies, but nothing has ever happened. While reparations for American slavery hasn't been discussed in the mainstream until quite recently, it has been on the table for a very long time with African Americans. This is a timeline of the most noted efforts, but it's by no means a complete account. Field order number 15 was the granting of 40 acres of captured land along the South Atlantic coast to each formerly enslaved family after the Civil War. This was reversed, however, as we know, immediately after Andrew Johnson became president, and that land was given back to its former Confederate landowners. After the Civil War in Congress, both Representative Thaddeus Stevens and Senator Charles Sumner advocated for land grants to former slaves, realizing that legal equality just was not enough. During the late 1800s, 1890s, and then early 1900s, there was a large mass movement of former slaves petitioning the government for reparations in the form of a federal monthly pension benefit. This was modeled after the Civil War veterans pension benefit. And Callie House, whose name you might know, was the movement's most prominent organizer. At this time, several resolutions were actually introduced into Congress for this pension benefit, but none of the resolutions ever went anywhere. In 1963, Queen Mother Audley Moore launched the modern day reparations movement. She published an extensive analysis at the time of reparations and mentored many generations of Black leaders, including members of the Black Panther Party. Through the 1960s and 70s, Black organizers ramped up their demands for reparations. And these included Martin Luther King Jr., who advocated for reparations as compensation for stolen wages. James Foreman, a leader in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, released the Black Manifesto, calling for reparations from white churches and synagogues. At the 1972 Black Political Convention, delegates demanded that the president create a Black majority commission to determine a procedure for calculating reparations and exploring ways to have this implemented. In 1987, a number of pro-reparations organizations united and formed the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparation in America, and COBRA. And a few years later, the NAACP officially endorsed reparations. Let's see. Can we go back to the, yeah, let's see, great. Great. Okay, in 1989, House Resolution HR 40 was introduced for the very first time, more than 30 years ago. Representative John Conyers from Michigan introduced the bill in the House of Representatives. And it was to create a commission to examine financial and other impacts of slavery and continued discrimination. He reintroduced this bill, HR 40, every session for 30 years until he retired. And despite the fact that at the time the bill was only a study bill No action involved at all. It never moved off the shelf. In 2015, the National African American Reparations Commission, NARC, was founded and developed a 10-point preliminary reparations plan that could serve as a model for what reparations might look like once they're adopted by the US government. Okay. After John Conyers retired in 2017, the mantle of HR 40 was picked up by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, and it was broadened to include making reparations recommendations. The first time Jackson Lee introduced the bill was in 2019, and she introduced it again in the 117th congressional session in 2021. So the bill now includes, in addition to just examining the need for reparations, that this commission be responsible for making recommendations and bringing them back to Congress. So today, for the first time in January of 2022, after 33 years in Congress, HR 40 is actually positioned for a vote on the floor of the House, but this doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's up to the House leadership at this point when or if they'll move it forward. Advocacy efforts are now focused on House leadership, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, to actually bring the bill to the floor for a vote. Okay, thanks, Ian. We can go back to non-screen sharing. Really appreciate your help. So while, give me 1 second here to catch myself up. While federal reparations are necessary for a national racial healing, repair work is happening on so many other levels and fronts, both public and private. As I'm sure you know, the state of California actually has its own reparations commission that's been modeled on HR 40, and they've been meeting since last June. There are too many projects in the fire at this point to list, both for African American reparations and Indigenous peoples' land back. The good news is they're starting to abound. Our 3 panelists are involved in this work from all different perspectives. And without further ado, I want to bring them into the conversation. So I'd like to actually ask David to step up first, and please let us know about your history and how you came to the reparations work that you do, why you feel so passionate about it, and how this is personal to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be talking about reparations, which I care a lot about. My journey with reparations doesn't have humble beginnings. It has downright embarrassing beginnings, but I don't mind sharing that with you this morning. And it started back in college. I was a sociology major, and I took a sociology of race class at the time, just to see what everybody was still whining about. Because at the time Obama was president, everything was cool. I was hearing people talking about us being post-racial, and my privilege enabled me to buy into that. And so I took this class and was absolutely rocked to the core. Started seeing what I was learning in the streets, and was feeling just very overwhelmed because my whole world essentially was being deconstructed. And so I was hearing problem after problem after problem, and it's so important for us to keep talking about the problems, but I wasn't hearing anything about solutions. And so the very last chapter of the textbook, they made a quick reference to what we might do to move forward. And they mentioned reparations. And that was a really pivotal moment for me, because I felt the sense of calling around reparations, and I knew that that was going to have a significant role in my life. I didn't know what to do with that calling, and I wouldn't know what to do with it for almost a decade later when the fund was launched. But racial justice became kind of like an unexpected life passion that I'm still working on today. And Karen, you had asked if the work is personal. And indeed, for me, it's deeply personal for a couple of reasons. The first is that I was lied to. And I know for a fact, Karen, that you were lied to. And every single person on this call has been lied to about the intensity and the magnitude and the severity of enslavement and everything that has happened to African Americans ever since, so that we can live our lives in a way where it feels like it was all a long time ago, or somehow pertaining to only one area of the country, or somehow already resolved. So I love reparations because built into the act of reparations is the act of telling the truth. And truth is something that I find myself craving after realizing that I grew up on a series of lies. The second is that deep into this process and in the middle of launching the fund, I discovered that the work is a lot closer than I even thought. While I was doing genealogy work one day, I discovered a line of my family that has roots in the South. And I had never been told about this particular line. I had always been told that we were the Northerners and we were the good people on the right side of history, which is largely a myth, by the way. Then I discovered this line, and I also discovered through census records that these Southern ancestors were also enslavers, which had never been spoken of in my family. And so those ancestors ultimately made me, and I'm made out of them. And so part of the work for me is figuring out what to do with that. And then lastly, I've come to believe that the reason white people are able to do what we've done to African Americans and every other group, and Stephen alluded to this in his reflection, which I really appreciated. But the reason that we've been able to do that, what we've done, is collectively whiteness and white supremacy has severed our connection to our full humanity. When we stop seeing the humanity of people of color, I think that we inadvertently stop seeing ourselves as human as well. And so from colonization onward, there's no way we could be in touch with our humanity and carry out all of the things that we've done. And I feel that loss when I'm with white people. And I feel it in our solemnness and our fear and our rigidness and how muted we are. And I would like very much for us to go through a mass atonement so that we can get back our collective soul. And so this work started out as very political, and somewhere along the line it ended up becoming very spiritual. And from both places, I want so much for reparations to finally be made to African Americans within my lifetime.
Thank you so much, David. Ian, can you share with us, please, your history and how you came to the work of repair and land back?
Yeah, and David, thank you for taking us to the spiritual. I'm going to begin with a blessing. It's in the chat for folks who want to read it on mute. Baruch atah haboreh mevi refuah likmo shiburot. Blessed are you, Creator, who brings healing to broken places. So I'm the great grandson of Nechama, or Nelly, who was an Eastern European Jew who fled pogroms or violence and moved to so-called Canada. And her daughter, Gertrude, who's here, right here, my great-grandma Baba, her and her family were granted land as sharecroppers through an organization known as the Jewish Colonization Association, which helped colonize parts of Canada, parts of Argentina, and Palestine. They struggled on this land. Every winter, they almost starved. They did not know what they were doing. And to make that land in their possession, which they could not own because they were Jewish, there was a massacre that took place on Treaty 4 territory 10 to 15 years before. These poor, struggling farmers moved to that land. I think about them when I think about my disconnection to the earth as a settler, as an uninvited guest in this land with Jewish ancestry from Eastern Europe. And I think about the healing needed in going back to do radical genealogy work similar to the work that David just described, to be clear and specific about the work needed for healing right now and the ways that I can actually be a part of a Jewish decolonization association that is rooted in returning land to all people who have been displaced and uprooted from their ancestral homelands. And right now, I'm born and raised, I'm the 4th generation to be born and raised on Tongva. The Tongva people are known as the people of the earth. And I was born near Kuruvungna, which is a village that means a place where we are in the sun, which is also known as Santa Monica, Westwood. And we are nearing Tu B'Shvat, which in Jewish tradition is the birthday of the trees on Sunday. And one of my entry points into connection with this earth and thinking about the healing that needs to ripple from 3 generations in the past and my great-grandma, Baba, to 3 generations in the future as a descendant and an ancestor myself, is the oak tree that I grew up with that's almost 300 years old in my parents' backyard. And I think of the powerful roots and points of disconnection, points of connection that it holds, and the witness that it served to the many broken treaties, the 18 broken treaties on this land. And I grew up in the Pacific Palisades with wealth, and most of my organizing is about surrendering or releasing that land and wealth and thinking about how I can be a good uninvited guest on this land for the generations to come. And I'll close by just naming the beauties of this year that we're in. In the Hebrew calendar, we are in a Shemitah year. Shemitah means sabbatical or release. It's a 7-year cycle where in this Hebrew calendar year, the land is supposed to be laying fallow. It's supposed to be resting. Enslaved people are freed, debts are forgiven, and we're collectively harvesting. So I've been thinking about how this year can be a leap year, because it also is a leap year, toward reparations, toward rematriation, and toward land back. Thinking about how I can honor my ancestors who are struggling on this stolen land in Treaty 4 territory and honor the position I grew up in, to think about what healing could look like, not just now, but for 3 generations to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. And Tracy, can you share with us, please, your personal history and how you came to this work and why you're so passionate about it?
Thank you. I also want to acknowledge, well, Karen, thank you for having us, and David and Ian. It was super powerful to just listen to, and I'm just really very grateful to be in this space with all of you. I appreciate this question. Yeah, I definitely am in that camp that, the political is personal, the personal is political. And I am a daughter and granddaughter of Japanese American folks who were put into Manzanar and Tule Lake, which were American concentration camps during World War II. Not to be confused with the euphemism of relocation center or internment camp. And also not to be confused with Nazi death camps and, that use the euphemism of concentration camp. My parents, were really involved in the Japanese American community. They started an organization in the 80s called the Japanese American Historical Society of Southern California. And so they would produce in-services for teachers in LA Unified about the issue of Japanese American incarceration during the war. And there is an annual pilgrimage to Manzanar the last Saturday of April of every year. If you've never been, I invite you to come. This year again, though, unfortunately, it will be virtual, which is a very obviously different experience, but hopefully we'll be getting back on our buses next year. So my parents' organization, they would organize buses to go to the pilgrimage. And when I was a kid, they started to have me help organize those buses. So I started to learn pretty early about what I wasn't being taught. And, you know, David, you were talking about like the lies we were told, and I very much feel that. And I was very angry. I was a very angry little child. And I was like that kid who later on in high school in government classes, I would take these articles about, you know, Manzanar and like different atrocities in our history and be like, can we study this? How come we're not talking about this? This is not in our textbooks. And my teacher would be like, we don't have time for that. And, you know, my classmates did not like that at all. And so the truth was very important to me, and being denied the truth was something I was very angry about. And in the process of visiting Manzanar, you know, my parents would tell me, like, you've got to talk to people from a different generation than you. You've got to talk to people who are there. You've got to ask questions and pay attention when we take you to places like this. And so I eventually, you know, met all of these folks who they're considered the Sansei generation, the third generation of Japanese Americans who grew up during the movement, not just the anti-war movement, but really the era following civil rights. And, you know, they learned from and worked with folks, you know, everything from going to Wounded Knee and, you know, working with the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets. You know, there was a big part of the Third World Liberation Movement that these mentors I was meeting were a part of. And that really opened up myself beyond my particular Japanese American history. And it really opened me up to other communities and our interconnection, and how much we're really part of this continuum, not just a continuum of struggle and a continuum of all of these battles in history, but a continuum of actually working together. And so I really learned and continue to learn from those folks who never stopped going. So particularly there's an organization called NCRR, Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress. And they're still around, and they're still moving forward. And, you know, they really, I think, became mentors of mine. And then other people in their sort of circles really like brought a lot of us in to understand that we have a legacy of standing up. We have a legacy of working with other people. These are folks who went on to organize for redress and really make sure that they make the point that Japanese Americans would not have won redress without the support of many, many, many other communities. There were so many folks who showed up in '81 when people were testifying. And, you know, there's no way that we could have won redress on our own. And I think there's also like a piece in me where after redress happened, and my grandmother on my father's side, my bachan, she was 101 years old. She was one of the last surviving Issei who was able to make the flight to DC. So she was one of the first bunch of Issei who were given the apology very publicly, given their check and other gifts. And my bachan was so thrilled. She was like, Washington, DC is the best city in the world, you know? And I found that so weird and ironic. And yet my grandfather, my mom's father, he died in 1978. He died before, I think, even knowing that there was an attempt for redress. He died an alcoholic and a very bitter person, I think. I think he had a lot of joy and passion inside of him, but I know that he felt very wronged. So I think that that little bit, that little teeny little like story, that's a big deal to me because it's a little bit of insight into what it means to not be able to reckon. I think that this work, the work of healing, requires the work of reckoning. And myself as an artist and an organizer, I feel like my work is work of reckoning, and it is work of healing. And so there is no repair without reckoning. There's no reconciliation without reckoning. And so I'm very driven to this work. And I had heard about Black reparations, you know, during my study of redress. And when we started to learn about things happening and picking up, you know, I think we just made concerted efforts to really just study and study and study, and then start to reach out and do what we've learned to do, which is to build relationships. So, and that's the main reason why I'm here today. You know, I want to build with all of you. I want to learn more about your group and build with Ian and David and Karen, and, you know, just we're here for the long haul of this work. And through this study too, we've been meeting with different folks from the Tongva and Chumash community and learning about those issues as well, and how we can start to even further kind of bring those into other spaces. So that's just a little bit on sort of my passion and personal sort of journey with this work. So thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. I want to do a time check with you all, maybe Michael or Stephen. How are we doing?
Have ample time.
We're doing
We
quite well.
generally go
Yeah.
to about 9:20. So that includes any further comments from the panelists as well as Q&A.
Okay. All right. I think we're doing okay, folks.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So Ian, I'd like to go back to you and ask you to talk about the organizations that you're working with and the specific kinds of reparatory justice for land back that you're involved with.
Great. And I just want to honor the beautiful share TKK you just did in your ancestors and the need for reckoning. I really felt that when you shared it. Thank you. So I work for a spiritual community called NEFA, and during this Shemitah year, sabbatical year, I've facilitated a couple of rituals, one at the beach with my friend who's the tribal secretary of the Tongva Gabarleño people, Kimberly Morales, and I'll put a ritual guide in the chat if anyone would like to do ritual connected to release of the land and being good guests where we are during this sabbatical year. I'm also going to put a link to the NEFA website, and then also 2 months ago, we hosted a screening called Unpacking Thanksgiving on Tongva Land with 7 different Jewish communities and 3 Indigenous speakers, one of whom is Indigenous and Jewish. And just a reminder that there's no binaries in these communities. My community is full of incredible Indigenous Jewish people, Black Indigenous people, Black Jewish people, and there's so many multiplicities of identities who make up the beauties of who we are. And I highly recommend watching City of Ghosts, which is what we screened, their episode Tobangar. It's in the chat. Most of the organizing I do and have done for the past year and a half has sort of been unintentional preparation for Shemitah, which is letting the land rest. And I'm a member of an organization called Resource Generation, which is a movement of young people with class privilege and/or access to wealth who are 18 to 35. I'm going to put a link about it in the chat. If you know anyone who meets those categories, feel free to reach out to me. Some of the things we've been involved in, just to make it a little bit more, just naming all the different forms of reparations that need to exist. I was sort of helping spearhead this effort to do resource mobilization to support Downtown Crenshaw Rising last year, and we raised around $10 million in a week to support their bid to buy back the Crenshaw Mall for Black LA. and which was denied. And now Downtown Crenshaw Rising is trying to take thousands of properties off the speculative market in South Central LA before the 2028 LA Olympics to stop gentrification and bring about community control. If you'd like to support DCR, I'm going to put the link in the chat also. And the majority of my organizing has been in relationship building. It's been in thinking about how we can be more powerful when we're more connected with one another and the earth, and specifically honoring the hosts on this land as the guests, the 2,000 to 3,000 living hosts, the Tongva Gabrielino people, who are still caretaking and making this land in the place that I grew up so beautiful, and place of dreams. Hollywood is created here, and so many other places that are built on unceded land. And so I'm really excited to be sharing with you all who may be hearing for the first time that the Tongva Tarahat Pahava Conservancy is the first Tongva-led conservancy and is just now able to receive donations for the first time. And during the Shemitah year, land will be returned to the Tongva people in Altadena, nearby Eden Canyon, which was a place of sharing and gathering amongst different tribes. And we've mobilized around $200,000 to support the conservancy, completely not publicly. And I'm excited as we publicly open this up to invite you all into supporting this specific property as a place of sovereignty, ritual, permanent housing for Indigenous elders, and a community center, as well as archive. A lot of how I'm coming to this as family that controls land throughout Tovangar, it's a pathway to healing and release of land, and thinking about how I can support in sovereignty for Indigenous people who have no sovereignty, are not federally recognized, and do not have the right to do ritual on their land. As someone who practices ritual, my ancestral rituals on other people's land. And so the goal with this conservancy is to receive land all throughout Tovangar, Southern California. And so I will mention toward the end, I'm exploring the possibility of getting a real estate license to support settlers and uninvited guests on this land into transferring land to the conservancy. And so if you have access to land, or if you know someone who has access to land and is interested in transfer, beyond supporting and donating to the conservancy, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. Those are the things I'm involved in. Thank you. I'll pass it to whoever you want to go next. Karen.
I'm going to ask Tracy to go ahead and share with us the specific kinds of reparatory, justice work that you're involved with.
Thank you, Ian. That's so exciting. And I'm sure that we at Nikkei Progressives want to partner up, and Vigilant Love as well, to just support and get involved with that as well. So I work very actively with Vigilant Love, which I mentioned, and also Nikkei Progressives. In terms of reparatory justice, Nikkei Progressives and NCRR, we have a joint reparations committee, and we work closely with various leaders in the reparations movement, especially Dreesen Heath out of Human Rights Watch, and Kenneth Henry. We continue to build and learn from, of course, members from NCOBRA and NARC. And we started really, some of the elders in our group wanted to right away do workshops for the community. They're former teachers. They're great at doing workshops. And others of us urged us to just pause for a second, though, on doing anything sort of in terms of public engagement, and just really go into a long period of study. And so that's what we started to do in 2020. I'm realizing it's 2022, so not last year, but in 2020, we really, wanted to focus, and as of course we study, we realized right away that we also needed to learn from live, living human beings who are doing the work now. And very much like Ian was mentioning, relationship building is just everything to my work and our work. And it's been incredible to build with folks in the HR 40 Coalition. I joined the legislative strategy group that meets every Wednesday. And, have learned so much from all of the organizations, from all of the people that are very active with the coalition. And right now we're really just trying to do some strategy work with different groups along different threads. So there are folks who are very focused on faith and ministry, outreach and community building. And so we're doing some of that work to bring in more of the Japanese American organizations who are faith-based and social justice oriented. But also we're trying to develop some workshops now where we can start to go into our communities. While we do have a very robust and amazing number of folks who are activists and organizers, you know, I would assume like any other community, we have a wide spectrum of interest, engagement, knowledge, curiosity, support for reparations. So we want to talk to not the choir. We want to go out into various organizations, segments of the community organizations, religious places, churches, temples, and bring this discussion to a wider swath of our community. So we're, you know, really trying to speak to folks who could really stand up. You know, we have hundreds of letters from Japanese Americans who were formerly incarcerated or who went through getting, you know, who are part of the redress movement, or who are 4th and 5th generation Japanese Americans who support reparations. And we have many, many statements, but I think we should have thousands, not just hundreds. I think anybody who got redress should be writing a letter in support of reparations. There is little bits of talk, and I'm one of those people who is very much supporting us doing a longer term strategy for HR 40, because in the case that we don't get a vote in January, I really would like to be a part of this thought that we have to do some longer term strategy building and looking at Juneteenth as an opportunity to work towards. We had a discussion last night in our reparations committee about even forming a contingent to go to DC. So maybe that's a seed that I can plant with all of you to consider having a contingent, all things being well with the world in terms of the pandemic, to safely go to DC in June. So these are very nascent sort of thoughts, so don't hold me to anything confirmed, but it is something that I think many people, including Kenneth Henry, Reverend Mark, and different people are excited to think about.
Karen, would you like me to go?
Oh, you're muted, Karen.
Tracy, I hesitate to put you on the spot, but when we had talked the other day, you had mentioned working with the Korean survivors of the Comfort Women, and I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable sharing a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, there are many efforts across the globe to support the Comfort Women that come not only from Korea, but from several countries. I think in the slide earlier, it mentioned some reparations and an apology from Japan, but that was between politicians, and every prime minister since has rejected the notion of comfort women. They're denialists. They are in no way, shape, or form trying to listen to the grandmas. They're not listening to the people who are directly impacted, nor their descendants. So it's a big fight still. And there are just a few surviving grandmas left, but they leave behind many descendants who want to carry this work on, of course. And so NCRR has been really involved in that issue. And I started to get more active in that many years ago, and just support however I can as an artist, but also just as a person to show up and to address what's happening and be a voice as a Japanese American. It's definitely not a Korea-Japan issue. It really is an issue of a huge human atrocity from the Japanese government and the Japanese army onto many, many, many countries. So there's a lot of reckoning that they still need to be held to. So yeah, please definitely, feel free to stay in touch with me, and I can put you in touch with Phyllis Kim. CARE is a group that, they used to be the Korean American education group, but they're really looking at comfort women action resources and education, and they really want people to be involved from all swaths and walks of life. So, please let me know if, oh yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Ian, for that awesome link. Yeah, please check that out. Kathy is on the board of CARE with Phyllis Kim, and really active on that. And there's going to be a conference in March, so stay up with all of this work. There's going to be, I think it's going to be virtual, so there'll be access to the discussion that's happening there, and it's still being solidified, but we can let you know more about that, and I can get links to you once those get confirmed. So thank you.
Please share with us about the Fund for Reparations Now.
Gladly, Karen. And Tracy, I do just want to share that Juneteenth, we haven't been around a long time, but both years that we've been in existence, there's just an incredible amount of pressure and energy around Juneteenth. So I think you're right on the money with that, and that'll be exciting to see what happens. So I'm going to share about the Fund for Reparations Now, but you can't really understand the Fund for Reparations Now without understanding the National African American Reparations Commission. So I'll talk about them first, and I prematurely dropped the link to their website into the chat while Tracy was talking, and I apologize for that. Oh, and all of a sudden screen share isn't working. Sorry. I just wanted to share their website with you. Shoot. This worked in the practice round. But anyway, thank you, Ian, for dropping the link into the chat again. But the National African American Reparations Commission is this collective of great Black thinkers nationwide that have thought about reparations and thought about what it could actually look like. And through that process, they have developed a 10-point plan for reparations. And I loved that plan so much, because when I was first grappling with reparations, it was so nebulous, and I was hearing all the voices saying, like, it's not possible. What could it even look like? And so to me, the 10-point plan gives me a lot of hope, because it's very tangible. It's basically saying, like, here's what it can look like, and now we just need the federal government to get their act together and give it funding. And so the job of the Fund for Reparations Now is twofold. One is to build out, one is to implement that 10-point plan in a very small but meaningful way right now while we're waiting for federal reparations. And so it's designed so that white folks can pay into the fund to bring these projects to life. And I'm happy to say we just completed our first major project, which was with the Elaine Legacy Center in Elaine, Arkansas. Elaine, like Tulsa, which is becoming a very known story, was part of Red Summer, which was this deadly series of incidents of white violence against African Americans. And the Elaine Massacre was actually the largest episode of racial violence in American history, but it's a very unknown story. And so the Fund for Reparations Now partnered through the direction of NARC, partnered with the Elaine Legacy Center to start telling that story and to raise funds so that the folks on the ground there in Elaine could honor their dead through the construction or the renovation of a museum that will tell that story. So I'm gonna try to screen share what, nope, the option's not there. So that's one of our goals. The other goal is to build, we've been charged by NARC with building out the white lane of the reparations movement. And so that we can ultimately get, you know, federal reparations from the federal government. And I'm dropping the link to our website in the chat now. Maybe we can circle back and share it later, but you'll notice that white visitors to the site can engage with the platform by first signing our collective statement of apology. And that was written in collaboration with Dr. Ron Daniels of NARC. And so there's some standard language about what we are owning up to. And then there's also a place where folks can enter in personally what this means to them and why they're doing it. The second step is to pay into the fund. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. And then the third step on the platform is accessing resources and action steps for white folks to continue to do this work, because you know, saying we're sorry means that we're going to change and that we're not going to continue to act in the ways that we have. And so there are resources there so that white folks who are interested can continue this marathon and anti-racist journey that will hopefully last their entire lives.
Thanks, David. And I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, while you're still talking, while you're there, to extend a little bit and move into the next question, which is, what are one or two? Oh, there's the website. Yay! Do you want to take a minute and go ahead and share about it, please?
Super quickly. So here's the website, and you'll see the 3 steps here. This is a little bit about the fund and links to the 10-point plan. But the first step is own up, sign the statement of apology. The second is to pay in, make your reparations contribution. And then the third step is do better. And so what did you want me to expand on, Karen? Sorry.
Oh, and this is, you know, moving into our question about allyship. And if you can share, you know, maybe 1 or 2 practices that being an ally and working in allyship that is required, and how do you implement this at the fund?
Sure. So while I'm still screen sharing, I want to show you something that I think makes this work and especially unique. We have make your reparations contribution. You'll notice it says contribution and not donation. And we have in big red letters right here, this is not a donation. And so while we were designing the fund with NARC, a lot of intentionality was put into taking out the traditional paternalistic white savior aspects of that has been so prevalent in white philanthropy. And so one thing that's really important to us is the spirit in which like money is given. And so instead of thinking of it as like a donation, charity from like the good of your heart, this is thought of more as compensation for 402 years now of theft and murder, and you know, the legacy that we have from enslavement on. So that's a very important part of allyship in the reparations movement specifically. It's not thought of as charity. It's finally compensation. And then the other thing that I really love about our model is that, well, first of all, it's crucial in the reparations movement, in African-American reparations, that it is Black leaders who are defining what reparations is and what it looks like and what forms it should take and who should receive it. And I've always, I've come to understand that that's paramount. But then over the years, while I was trying to figure out this calling, I've been like, well, what do I do with my skills and leadership abilities? And how do I guess I struggled for several years with figuring out how to show up without making myself small in the name of being a good ally. And so I'm really happy with the model that we have, and it was borrowed from Aware LA, whereas we are completely 100% supporting Black visions for reparations. And at the same time, NARC trusts us to talk to white people and to bring white people into the fold. And so we're firing on all cylinders, trying to figure out how to do that. And Karen, I know that you know that. And so it's challenging. It's fully challenging, invigorating work. And so I'm just happy that I've been able to find a place that really fits, that is challenging, where I'm not, where I'm fully engaged and still supporting the leadership of folks of color.
Thank you. And Tracy, the same question to you about doing your ally work and what that requires of you and how you implement it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely consider myself an accomplice and a partner in crime. I actually don't really use the word ally. I do feel like that's necessary, and it's up for my partners to decide whether I'm being a good ally. I can't be like, I'm a great ally, you know? So, but I am definitely an accomplice. I see myself as always working through a solidarity lens in practice, very much the same as what David was saying. It is, you know, something we talk about a lot in terms of centering and following the lead of folks who are Black leaders, who are the leaders in this movement, who've been doing this work for years and decades, and for the people who are directly impacted, descendants and people living today, you know, that we definitely have to listen to what the needs are. And I just think that that's a very fundamental approach with any kind of solidarity work, with engagement, action, activism, mutual aid, is to really just listen first. Like, what is the need? What is it that people are calling for? And at the same time, yeah, as we build, of course, offer up our ideas. I think sometimes there are folks in, I'm just being very frank here, there are folks in the Japanese American community who I think will say a lot of like, you shoulds based upon their experience and knowledge of our own redress movement. Whereas, you know, we're definitely the folks who within that the same community will challenge that and say, you know, we needed to be trusted during the redress movement to decide for ourselves what it is we needed and wanted. And taking in, of course, other opinions and support, of course, yes, but, you know, we needed to be trusted to decide and make, you know, demands for ourselves. So we very much are grounded in that. So if you hear people in the Japanese American community saying, well, they should be doing this and that, you know, I am not of that, I'm not in that school. So we really want to challenge those kinds of ways of approaches and really stick to like building partnerships and being great accomplices and partners in crime in this. So.
Thank you. And Ian, can you share also how you look at this and handle your role as an ally or a
accomplice? Yeah, I mean, I like Tracy, your reframe. I mean, I think of myself as a traitor. Like, how am I being a traitor to colonialism? How am I being a traitor to white supremacy as a white settler person? And also just figuring out like, what is my benefit? How do I benefit? How will I benefit? How am I benefiting as land is being returned? In this climate catastrophe, in this world where there's 126,000 gallons of oil that's being spilled into the ocean, how am I benefiting? How is my material world benefiting when land is returned? And it's everything. One framework that's been very helpful for me is the framework of guest, or kuyam, or ger in the Torah and in the Bible, and in Leviticus 25:23. I'm going to get a little biblical. The land, it says that the land shall not be sold permanently because the land is mine, since you are all gerim tovashim according to me. It says that we are all guests, all of us. And as an uninvited guest in this land, I think about how I can be good kuyam. And actually there's a whole, Dr. Charles Sepulveda writes this incredible article called Our Sacred Waters, Theorizing Kuyam as a Decolonial Possibility. And he's one of the leaders of the Land Conservancy, and his visioning has made me feel like there's a role for me to play in getting rid of colonialism. And actually in the Torah, there's these laws of gerim, like how to be good, how to treat guests. And one of the laws is radical hospitality. And another law is caring for the ger, caring for the guest. Another law is creating an economic system that works for everyone. And the fourth law is creating a mechanism for status, citizenship, or recognition. And I want to name that, as I said before, there were 18 treaties that were quote unquote lost in 1861 and 1862 that federally recognized the Tongva people. And same in the Bay Area, same in Seattle, all of these major areas of urban metropolis were created on top of stolen lands, and the indigenous people are not federally recognized and have no sovereignty because of it. And I think one step toward being a good guest or uninvited person on this land is to recognize, like a land acknowledgement is one step. And the other framework that's been very helpful for me is this framework of tshuva. Teshuva means return or repair. And there's a teaching in the Talmud, which is this Jewish text, that says that tshuva was created before the world was created. Way before tshuva was created, this framework for basically reparations. And the 4 steps were very similar to what you said, Karen. It's like, first one is ceasing and stopping harm. The second one is a land and people acknowledgement, or acknowledging the harm that's happened. Thinking about the past indigenous people that have been here, the present indigenous people, and the future. And an awareness that something wrong has happened. And then accountability, taking responsibility. What is our role to play? Reparations, which could be land return, monetary, cultural, and then a guarantee of non-repeat, which for me is the hardest. Like, how do we actually guarantee that this harm will not happen again? And so I think that prayer for me is an important way to respond to that. How am I praying? What world am I praying for? And what can I surrender? Like, literally, if I have less access to resources, it's less likely that that harm will continue to happen. And so I think the surrender and release really helps me think about what guarantee of non-repeat and olam haba, which means the world to come, could happen.
Thank you. And Ian, while you're up, we're moving into our last question now, folks. But Ian, can you share with us what some possible action steps that ICUJP as an organization or individuals on the call today can take to become more involved in reparatory justice work, and to connect with your work?
First, I just want to center the importance of ritual. Every day I go to the beach and do this ritual called hitbodedut, which means cultivating spontaneous conversations. And I ask the ocean, the earth, myself, what am I tired of holding? What are you tired of holding? What will it take to actually let land rest? What can I release to support the healing of the earth? And so I'd invite you to ask yourself these questions. And Jewish practice today is Shabbat, 25 hours of anti-capitalistic rest and pleasure, where we get to be in this world to come. And so responding to these questions for me over and over again, what can I release? What can I release? What can I release? What can we release together? Has been a helpful framework for me in the Shemitah release year. And I'll invite ICUJP and each of you individually in it seems like 100 to 200 organizations that are represented on this call, to make a kuyam noa'a. Kuyam noa'a means guest offering or guest exchange. It's an invitation into right relationship and to being good guests on this land. So it can be an offering that's financial. if you have access to resources, if your organization has access to resources, you can put a budget line, 1%, 5% towards supporting this Tongva Tarahat Pahafa Conservancy. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now, and I'd encourage everyone to click on it and not immediately try to do the donation, but it has all the information of how to donate to the Tongva Tarahat Pahafa Conservancy, which your organization can support, which you individually can support. And I'm especially thinking of folks on this call who own land. Hold me with compassion and love, and also possibility that we can relate to land differently. And so if you're interested in thinking about how to relate to the land that you own, or that maybe your family owns, or someone you know in your life owns differently, and thinking about what it might mean at the end of your life, or in your lifetime, to transition your land to Indigenous people or excess land to Indigenous people, please reach out to me, connect with me, and I would love to support you to think about how we can dream into things differently. And I'd say those are the major things. I'm also going to share a form where you can put your contact information to be kept up to date with the Land Conservancy, and grateful for all of your support in making rematriation or healing of the earth through an Indigenous woman framework possible where we are.
Thank you. Tracy, and can we hear from you, please, about what organizations can do, what individuals can do to help support the work you're doing?
I think definitely just very simply staying in touch with us and starting to build and break bread. Right after 9/11, there are many members of the Japanese American community who came out very publicly, very vocally in support of our Muslim communities. And at the same time, we didn't know each other. And so it was actually folks from the Muslim community who reached back and said, who are you? And that's amazing. And, out of every hate call that they got on their phone lines, they were overwhelmed also by, the solidarity work and approach and support that was given from our community. But they said, yeah, let's get to know each other. Let's break bread. And that led us to, really doing so and working together. Folks from our community, especially again, NCRR, really went out, visited the mosques, right? We eventually built up our program, the Bridging Communities program that brought together high school students from Japanese American and Muslim communities to learn from each other. And now Vigilant Love carries on that work through the Solidarity Arts Fellowship. And we have a 6-month program. We have a cohort. Last year we had a cohort of 18. This year we have a cohort, I think, of 14 or 15 folks. And now they're college aged activists and artists who go through a very intensive program to learn about our liberatory lineages, our struggles, the histories of the surveilled, and they come together in mosque, in pilgrimage. It's a really great program. It's something that I think could really use support. So I think in ways that you can to think about supporting Vigilant Love, coming to our iftar in April. It's our one fundraising moment. It's going to be virtual, but that's going to be in April, and you can, I'll drop, thank you. I was going to say, I should put Vigilant Love's contact in there so that you can stay up with them. I'll put my email in. Of course, you can feel free to email me and I can connect you with other folks as well. Looking more, I dropped the link in the chat for CARE. If you want to read more about what's happening with the Comfort Women, it's a really active website. They're very good about putting up their latest articles and pieces about that. And, staying up with our reparations committee. We're always looking to do talks with folks. It would be lovely to maybe do a virtual breaking of bread, just to learn more about what you all are doing. Mark Masaoka has educated us a little bit about your group. And we're just all amazed that you've been getting together so early in the morning for so many years. That's really incredible. I was thinking I'd love to see photographs of you all like 20 years ago getting together at the church. That just, I don't know, that's something I feel like I need to see because it's awesome. And yeah, so, you know, we're just in it for the long haul, and we're going to continue to build and do things. And if you're interested in this idea of a contingent, and David, we should bridge up for sure. And I'm so excited about that. And so, yeah, please stay up with us on that. So I'll put my email, and if any of you are on Instagram, that's another good way to stay connected with some of the latest stuff that we're all doing.
Thank you. And
Karen,
David,
we're bumping up against the time. It's almost 9:15 now. Maybe you could say something yourself, because you've been facilitating all the rest of this. But
well, I'm going to forfeit my time and give it to David to tell us how we can support the Fund for Reparations now, and then move into questions. I apologize. I know you've been very good about keeping to the time frame for your meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. And I'm going to be so brief because I think I went through a lot of it already, but I would invite each of you as individuals, especially those of you who are white, to visit our site and engage in those 3 steps: the owning up, paying in, and checking out the resources to do better. I know that you are already on your lifelong journey, but hopefully you can find something there that will be helpful to you. The fund also runs a council of organizations, a lot of them being faith-based, that look at reparations and how we can do reparations in our organizations. That's run by a couple of my amazing colleagues, Caroline and Jennifer. So if you're interested in being a part of that, I'm dropping in our email so you can reach out to us and get on those calendar invites. And the last thing I want to say is that the invitation to reparations is always there, but right now I think is particularly palpable. On Monday, we will be commemorating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And one of the speeches that Dr. King gave during his lifetime was called "We're Coming to Get Our Check." And it's talking about his plans to go to Washington and get their compensation check as an African-American community. And so I just wanted to extend the invitation, if you want to issue the check for Dr. King's birthday. I think that it's a really beautiful time and a really beautiful way to honor his life.
Thank you. Michael, do we have time for some questions?
Michael, you're muted.
The answer is yes.
just a few minutes. So Steve has his hand up, and go ahead, Steve, and then I want to issue an invitation. Go ahead.
Thanks to all of the panelists. Just an extraordinary amount of information and compassion. Karen, at your discretion, I wanted to ask, I think many people, if not everyone on this call, are convinced with the need and the imperative of reparations for so many reasons that you gave. Many of our concerns is now convincing others of that. And the arguments and myths that keep getting thrown at us when we talk about reparations. The notion, I am not guilty, I was not a slave owner. The question of indigenous people, there's been a lot of talk about that, but are indigenous, the heirs and ancestors, entitled to reparations when all of the discussion is about Black reparations? Will there be a needs test? Will Kanye West get reparations as well as others? And what about the descendants of free Blacks, the handful of those families? So those kinds of challenges are thrown up by politicians, by others. and with a little bit of time, if you, Karen, or anyone on the panel want to address them.
Before we had 3 or 4 hands up. I want to say briefly, I would like to invite all of you back to the event on the 23rd that we're doing, because I think we're specifically looking for exactly the kinds of things you're doing, which is concrete actions people can take to overturn and reverse systemic racism. So I'm going to look for the link to that and put it up. Carol Francis and I think Phil had a hand up, and then we'll go back for some quick responses. But try to be brief, please. Carol Francis, are you muted or?
Yeah, I just very briefly want to say, when you said, Tracy, there's no reparations without reckoning, it just was amazing. I was writing that down so I could remember to speak during the Q&A about the fact that last week we heard about tutus and the whole movement about reparations, and you can't have reconciliation without owning up to it. So I just, and then I noticed David put that in the chat. It's really amazing, and thank you very much for that.
Phil, go ahead. Phil Wei, yeah, you're muted, Phil.
I'm here. There we go. Yeah, all right. I was trying to find out to unmute, and I think you did it for me. I have just so many thoughts and questions about this. First off, I'm just so appreciative for all of you, Tracy and Karen and David, for what you have shared with us. It's important and stimulating. I had one particular question to address to Tracy, with a little premise that in the first few months and years after 9/11, there developed a very strong solidarity between the Japanese American community and the Muslim community. That was based on a real perception of the solidarity that they shared in terms of the reaction of the U.S. government to the situation. Anyway, I just that was really amazing and wonderful to me to see. The other thing, I'm back during those years, we had a member of the NEFA for Human Rights and Recess as a regular participant here by the name of Michael Yanagita. And he kind of dropped out of sight. And is he still involved? And can you give us some more links to the NEFA for Human Rights and Redress and about the bands in our pilgrimage? Can you drop those on the chat for me? Thank you.
Thanks. So I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Maybe we can get a quick response, and then we'll have to close out shortly after that.
Okay. Yeah, Steve's question is, the $64,000 question, and I'd love other people to chime in. I believe that, one answer is just to keep doing the work that we're doing. There are people that will probably never be reached, but we need to get a critical mass, and we need to get laws changed. And getting laws passed right now in the government is problematic, as you all know. But I think we just have to keep doing what we're doing, making sure we know answers that we can give when people ask them. And there's always, you know, practicing, being able to practice some of those answers with each other so that we have them at the ready. And I'd like to hear what anybody else has to say about that. And then Tracy, if you have any specific answers to the specific questions that were asked to you.
David, do you want to take this?
Sure, I'll just quickly say that, I mean, at the fund, we hear these questions all the time. And we like, especially on our social media and our trolls. And we actually have quite a bit of compassion for these questions, because we know that it's just because folks have been lied to, just in the same way that we were lied to. And so the fund, that there are reasonable and logical, well thought out responses to all of the common questions that we get. And we're actually going to be making a series of TikToks this year to address those. I'm really excited about that. They don't exist yet, but hang in there. And then to the last point about, you know, the needs test and does Kanye West get reparations? I think our role as white folks is just to listen and support whatever it is the Black leaders in this realm are thinking of, and how they address those issues, and trusting that there are some really intelligent folks who have been working on this a really long time, and they will be able to address those issues as much as you can for a collective blanket policy that covers an entire nation and 400 years of abuse.
Really briefly to add to those wonderful answers, I am excited and hopeful that the HR 40 will pass, and collectively, congressionally, systemically, all these things will shift. And in the meantime, there are things that we can do. Like there is an actual land conservancy that is Indigenous led, all Tongva led, that can receive land right now. And so I think in the meantime, there are things that we can do, just like David shared about paying checks. There is land that can be returned. There are resources that can be shared. And I think what's important for me is surrendering or letting go of resources or supporting reparations is a part of our own healing. Letting go of resources can be pleasurable. It can make us feel good and less constricted, and open up our hearts to the possibility of a new world. And so I think just like getting clear about what is our own personal stake or interest in rematriation, return of land, and or reparations for Black and or Indigenous people is really helpful. For me, talking about that, when you're close to the earth, where is the place where you're close to the earth? Where is the place where healing feels possible? I would recommend those things.
Yeah, so oh, I'm getting echo. Let's see what's happening. So I always hear this question, like, how do we talk to the naysayers, right? And, you know, something that I encourage folks to do who if you want to engage in these conversations, and I hope we all will, is to actually write as much as you need to write, in imagining yourself talking to folks. Imagine maybe writing a letter to your community. I recently wrote a book of poetry, but in that I decided to include notes to self and notes to community. And I specifically wanted to utilize this moment of releasing a book to write a note to Nikkei community on reparations. And it was a really great exercise, because I found myself speaking from a place of very intentional compassion, because I don't want people to feel like I'm just negating them right off the bat for being apprehensive or being resistant, right? So would it be okay? Can I just read you a little bit of what I started to write? Okay. So it's just
Tracy, I'm intruding here because at the end of our closing circle, we ask people to send us off with a reading or a prayer. Okay. And with the permission of Michael and others, let's do that as part of our program.
Okay, so should I wait?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Go
And then
ahead.
I'll just add, I think I put NCRR's link in there. If I didn't yet, I'll do that right now. And then, yes, Phil, Mike Yanagita is still involved. I think he's doing a lot of caretaking for his wife, but he's still supportive and out there in the community. I will let him know that you said hello. And yeah, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we did the Little Tokyo to Manzanar Spirit Run, and he and his wife both joined us for a couple of days this year. We did it in pieces. It took about a month and a half to go the whole way, but they were there for the last couple of legs of it. So I do want to offer, I work on two publications, which is Change Links and Turning the Tide, and I'm on the local station board at KPFK, and anything I can do to facilitate getting these messages out, this discussion on the air and into print. If you want to try to write something up, I'm on a tight deadline for both of those in the next week or so, but please, I'll follow up with you, and we'll see if we can get something on the radio as well as soon as possible. Pacifica does do an annual Juneteenth, so if that's something to aim for, might be interesting as well. So we are at the point where we do our individual requests to lift people up, and then we'll have a closing statement, which, Tracy, if you want to read some of that, that would be perfect. So if people do have people they want to keep in mind at this time who are looking for healing in particular, or have suffered losses, please share that with us. I don't see any hands up, so maybe we'll just go to the closing. Tracy, if you want to read that. Steve, go ahead.
Yes, I was leaving some time for others, but we're all touched by this pandemic in so many ways. And yesterday, my wife, Wendy, was tested positive. She has mild symptoms. She had a PCR test, and we're waiting for those results. Thank goodness for her triple vaccines. And we're very comfortable and hopeful for her. But in thinking about that, it's all of the people who have not had access to vaccines around the world, and to those in our country who have either not had access or are refusing access. That is what makes this so difficult. And so your good wishes would be supportive at home here. Thank you so much.
And to all of those who are speaking up or speaking out too, knowing the healing has already come, and for just the continued work of all of the speakers here and how they've come together in the unity in releasing the past, using that as history, but praying for our support right now in the now, how it is we're working together in the now to support this better earth in harmonious relationships and positive trade.
Thanks. Tracy, you want to do that brief reading, and then we'll close off this portion.
Yeah, I will read just the first portion here. So it's NTNC, which is Note to Nikkei Community, on reparations as guided by the legacy organizations, organizers, scholars, and other leaders of Black communities steering the movement to reckon with the harms of slavery, Jim Crow, and pervasive systems, policies, and institutions of racism that still thrive today. Please, Nikkei JA family, please. When our Black community members, including our Black Nikkei folks, ask us to speak up for redress and reparations, say yes. Stand up and say yes. I know for some, or many of you, that might not be your first reaction. You might feel stress rise in your chest with an initial response that sounds like, how on earth would that be possible? Who will pay for that? Slavery is in the past. How can we deal with it now? I will not shame you for your apprehension or skepticism. I instead invite you into dialogue. I will instead challenge you to place a solid pause on your hesitation or negation of the concept and the movement, and begin directing questions toward those leading the movement. They have been leading and building and researching and formulating and organizing the cause for decades. Take in first the case for reparations as laid out by the many great minds doing the work. Allow yourself to reimagine life here for everyone as we finally move beyond this moment of reckoning, of uncovering the reality of racism and anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity that started in our foundations as a country and never ceased to dictate power and outcomes throughout every system since. Give yourself permission to imagine real, feasible, actionable, and concrete elevations in our institutions and systems. Imagine us a country being able to experience justice and peace that is so deep because when it mattered, the people calling for it were listened to, and their calls were heeded at impossibly long last. And then it goes on to just sort of talk about sort of my own self as a person, you know, a descendant of people who were incarcerated during the war, and just asking people to imagine the kind of breath that we will be able to take when we actually reckon and repair. So that's the kind of note to your own community that I think would be very powerful to hear you all write. And if in the future you ever want to go through some exercise to write for yourself these things, I'm happy to come back and you know, lead some prompts and exercises to get that done, because I do think it's going to be really important that everyone makes personal statements to their own families and their own, you know, neighbors and communities, right? So thank you for letting me share some of that.
Yeah, thank you. So I do want to reiterate, please, if all of you can come back on the 23rd, Sunday the 23rd from 4 to 6, we're doing this faith-rooted network on ending systemic racism. And I think the kinds of work that you're presenting is exactly the sort of, you know, framework and guidance we're looking for concrete, impactful actions that people can take to really transform, you know, the system and uproot systemic racism.
Did you
So
say
that's
4
in the chat.
p.m.?
Yeah, 4 p.m., 4 to 6 on Sunday, the 23rd.
That'll work much better than 7:30. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Exactly.
Can I just add to that? You're all also welcome to join us for our planning meetings, which are the first, second, and fourth Friday of most months, except for this month. I'd forgotten it's gotten changed. So right after our forum, which isn't 7:30, it's 9:35.
Yeah. Yeah. So next Friday at 9:30, 9:35, we will be having the last sort of pre-planning meeting for the 23rd. If you want to come back then too, there'll be a link in the Friday forum chat for that. So thank you so much. We're going to take a little break here and then our board members will stay on the chat, but we're at time basically. So Dave, if you could probably cut the recording also to make it easier for Tracy. I'm sorry, for Morgan to.
May I say one last?
Yes, Karen.
Please, Karen.
On behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for having us in your warm, engaged, and positive reception. I think we all feel quite at home here, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. So thank you for engaging with us. And I want to just send out a special thank you to Ian, David, and Tracy for getting up early in the morning. I feel energized. Thanks to all of you. And one last thing, and Tracy touched on this, Ian did too, David as well. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We'll be doing this for a long, long time. And being together and supporting each other in this process makes all that doable. So look forward to seeing you all again soon.